Welcome back to the Goatworn Armcast. We're back at it. It's myself, Goatworn Armband, along with Guthrum of Norvik, Just Eastern Things, and the Shire Reeve. We're also joined by a guest today, but more on that later. So, yeah, guys, it's been a salty few days. Obviously, our take on Assassin's Creed Farm Harbor went up. And then very shortly after, a video of Sheringham Viking in real quotation marks Viking festival. So it's kind of been one after the other, really, hasn't it?
Definitely, yeah. It's always somehow every time I see Woofer in the wild, it gets worse.
So we thought this week we'd, as a bit of a palate cleanser, focus on what is authentic and what is historically accurate. So we're going to be moving away from that a little bit this week, so that should be a nice change of pace. But first up, we didn't quite get around to all the questions we wanted to last time because we're just so focused on that trailer. So we got a couple of questions just to start us off. We'll start with Toby Dones, who's one of our Patreon supporters, who asks, who are your top 3 inspirations for kit levels? So I'll chuck this over to you guys first. So Toby Dones asks, who are your top 3 inspirations for levels of kit? So I'll chuck this over to you guys first. Like, who's your benchmark for good quality reenactment kit?
Number one's always going to be Wolf Oddness with Matt Bunker. His level of kit has been exceptional. It's always been something I've looked at as an inspiration to have my kit up to his levels. And then number 2, you can see them in some of the photos, but I've not been able to actually track him down on Facebook. But there's a group of Russians that I spoke to in Poland last year, and they all portray kind of 11th century Rus guard, and I can't describe it, but they're all the exact same, except from the leader of the group who has a slightly different helmet, and they looked amazing. I'll see if I can dig a photo out and send it to you guys so you can put it on the podcast. But I was speaking to them, and they were in the army together. They live in the same village. They work in the same place together, and have all the same kit. And they traveled to Poland together, and their kit looked exceptional. It was made.
Tight.
Yeah, man, it looked really good. It was made by Oleg Koznelkov, Helgi's True History Shop.
Yeah.
He supplied them, and because a lot of his stuff is very good. And
if you're doing a proper Rus impression, his stuff is really good. Like if I was doing an Eastern Viking impression, that's the first place I'd look.
You won't find any D-plate Lamellar there.
Well, you will, but it's correctly contextual.
Yeah, he was one of the first people to make some of that earlier D-plate back in the day. Him and I think Alban worked alongside him back in the day, or something I was told. So it's surprising when you hear about these people that helped kind of create that sub-genre of people wearing shit. But yeah, no. I haven't got a third, if I'm honest with you. I haven't come across any kits that have really stood out to me just yet. A lot of the kit I see, which I actually go, oh, that kind of looks nice. It isn't authentic. But if we're talking authentic-wise, those Russians as my number 2, but number 1's definitely Matt Bunker. And his group, I don't know what his new group's called, but Wolf Oddness was just exceptional. Just their level of detail is phenomenal.
Yeah. What about you, Shire Reeve?
It's a difficult one. I'd say definitely along the lines of Matt Bunker and a lot of the other early Saxon guys, or early pre-Viking Age, migration era, etc. A lot of them seem to have an exceptional level of kit. Also, some of the late Roman guys, Magister Militum, they're all really good as well. So groups like that really pay attention to the details and produce nice kits.
Oh, sweet. Guthrum, what have you got? A top three or a top couple?
Much as has been said, Wolfheadness and their split off group. I think you were trying to work out the name of was Swahanaz, with David Huggins and a couple and his son and a couple others, I believe. But on top of that, I am really very fond of Adam Parsons' kit.
That's a shout actually.
His gear, especially his compression, along with some of his group members, they are really well made. Like I don't think I've seen them in person greatly, but I've seen individual pieces of them, and everything is just exquisite. And then to this list, I would also add a lot of the Marrowbud fellas.
Thomas Vlasti, etc.
Thomas Vlasti's Vlasti's group. I've probably butchered his surname there, unfortunately. But yeah, those are all good stuff.
I mean, just to complete the four, I've also got to throw my towel behind, or my hat behind Wolfheadness, and anyone associated with that and subsequent groups, because I mean, anyone who says that the Dark Ages are boring or vibrant or uninteresting, that's where I point them. Because even though it's a bit away from my period, the Viking Age, it's still a great example of the early times and really sets aside this idea that people were just wearing brown rags and covered in shit all the time, So yeah, I think that would have to be my top one. Ross Cronshaw's kit. I've not seen the rest of his kit. The rest of his group's kits. I've only seen his. But just when he sent me the pic to do his Goatworn vacation for his profile picture, it blew me away, the quality of what he was wearing. So I'd have to go with those two, really. We have our next question from John Jacob. Why am I the best bodyguard ever? I'm assuming that's an in-joke to one of you.
It
I know
it is an in-joke.
Who's let's hear a bit about that then.
So, generally speaking, on a couple of occasions, John is my bodyguard as the Shire Reeve, so he's my shit kicker. And yeah, so it's just alluding to that, really.
So that was so that's one from John Jacob. We have one from James Smith, which I think is a really interesting question, and I think we'll have a fair bit to say on this. What is the most annoying thing in reenactments out of anything, including behaviours? I know we've often had discussions in my group and between us here about what grinds our gears with reenactment. So I'm kind of interested to see which one, because I know we've got a few, which one people go with. Guthrum, what's your pet peeve in reenactment?
Yeah, it is a really good question. I've got lots of pet peeves in reenactment, to be honest. I think my major pet peeve has to be the attitude of certain individuals when they say things along the lines of, "It's my hobby, I will do it how I want to do it, and damn the evidence." That's not quite how it works when your hobby is educating the public. Would you expect your children to be taught bollocks in school, for instance? Would you expect... Obviously, there's nothing I can do about it. It's just something that knocks me off a bit.
Yeah.
People can do whatever they want.
I mean, I certainly get understand the argument that, at the end of the day, they pay their money, and what their enjoyment is what they play and get out of it. But I know, at the expense of repeating myself from an earlier podcast, when you are teaching the public, you're doing school visits, at that point, you don't get to use that excuse. So yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are deliberately misleading people at that point.
Mm.
And in my mind, at least, that constitutes fraud.
Yeah.
You know, like, and if that is the attitude you want to take, maybe you shouldn't tout yourself as Vikings or Saxons or Picts or Dark Age.
Well, I mean, let's be honest.
You should be a historically inspired LARPer.
Yeah,
LARP
is a fairly open and active hobby. If you want to go do that, go do it.
Exactly. And it's not even that, but I prefer having a steel weapon. Create a group for steel weapon LARP. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be safe and don't mislead people.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just Easton, what's your pet peeve?
When you guys already touched on it, but when they wear, for sake of being vulgar, when they wear shit, all right, when they're wearing absolute shit, and they portray themselves as something fully authentic. We've had this, and we've all mentioned it already, but we've said this multiple times. But when you go out and drop £1,000 on crap, and then they turn around and go, "But I'm historical. I'm doing school shows. I'm teaching the public." And then the people that spend £100, £200 on the authentic stuff and make it look much better, look better, these guys get overlooked because people like fantasy. It pisses me off, man. I get we all make mistakes. Like even now, like I come and ask you guys for advice on stuff. We spoke about swords recently, etc. But like there has to come a point where you look at yourself and you must understand that you're shit.
Yeah.
And you just refuse to accept it. And people that do dangerous hits when you fight in Western or Eastern, and then get all antsy and say, "Oh well, we play with metal bars." Those people piss me off.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah, the whole attitude thing.
Yeah, to be a little bit different, like apart from the kit. So I posted something up on my page recently of a guy getting hit in the neck, and one of the comments was, "Oh, it's all part of the game" or something. And I didn't reply to it because I wanted to see
that.
if anybody else replies to it. But
that was very much a.
It's not part of the game. It's not part of the game.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we all want to go. We all want to go home at the weekend. Oh, sorry, at the end of the weekend.
And I think people that have the attitude where we swing these things wildly. If you don't like it, well, don't fight. Are the same sort of people where anyone with any sort of skill and a lot of Regia, a lot of the Vike, a lot of good Eastern people can fight. And it is fighting at some points can fight really well. And these are the sort of people when they get hit cry. And I just I can't accept that.
So what about you, Alex? What's your
I generally agree with what's been said. I think my biggest one is the what we describe as an elite nature. You don't you buy what you want to buy. You don't listen to anyone telling you otherwise, and you get antsy. You start causing problems in the reenactment community. What I think the most is it's not about the kit. There are people who make mistakes and buy kit that isn't right and then are ready to be educated. You can, they're perfectly willing to hear what is correct. And I've known quite a few of these people. They show you pictures of their kit when they first began. Hell, yourself, Goatworn, your first kit is certainly interesting. And the thing is, that's the right mentality to have. Whereas these people, they get offended when you tell them that their kit isn't authentic. And again, like we said, LARP is one thing. Ahistorical intention is one thing. But then claiming something to be historical while it remains completely inauthentic is just, it's childish.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. My kit's evolved and is still evolving in my hobby. one of the most recent things was that actually I didn't realise is regarding the wearing of Thor's hammers and whether they be worn round the neck, or more likely, as the evidence just shown to me has indicated, more likely worn on a belt, and that actually wearing the Thor's hammer around my neck is a more Christian thing and wouldn't have been done with a hammer. And that's something I've never heard before and didn't realize that was, that there was evidence supporting this alternative view, rather than go, oh, well, I've been doing it this long, I'll keep going. I've dug down and researched, and I've just, chased that up because I'm always willing to be educated. So yeah, I think that stubbornness is probably, and I think we've all touched on it on different examples and different aspects of it, but it is stubbornness at the end of the day, and a refusal to move on and improve, which is vastly ironic, at least in Viking reenactment, being that was their whole shtick, was moving around, finding new things, adapting and improving themselves. It's kind of laughable that Viking reenactors in particular won't improve their kit based on new knowledge, when that's exactly what the people they're supposed to be recreating would actually do historically.
It's a very interesting point, actually.
Yeah. Hopefully that kind of gives some. I think that kind of gives an idea for people why we do the the salt slinging, as it were. Because it does grate our gears, but I suppose there's a certain point where we've just got to laugh at it at some.
Definitely. Right, so that's all the questions from last week, isn't it?
We had one more, which was Emmett Taylor asking, what is the average airspeed of an unladen swallow?
It's a reference to Monty Python.
Yeah, we could point him in the primary source.
What do you mean, African or European? Ha ha ha.
There's a catapult in Caerphilly Castle. I'm not a trebuchet. I apologise to the catapult people, but we could probably make it go very fast if we use that trebuchet. Just saying.
True, yeah. But would it go faster than the speed of it without the catapult? Would flinging a dead one in a catapult go faster than a flying one?
I'm hoping it would be able to fly when we eat it, but I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, so you're thinking it'll stabilize mid yeet,
like a gyroscope? Yeah, man.
Yeah. I like that. I like that idea.
And we do have our guest, and we obviously last week we were talking about accuracy or lack of in video games about the Dark Ages. Well, this individual's been working with Guthrum of Norvik and with the Shire Reeve on a video game that more accurately represents Dark Age combat, and not only the combat but the aesthetic as well. So I think the best thing to do is to introduce him and let him talk more on the subject. So Bennett, if you'd like to switch on your microphone and join us in the chat.
All right, hello.
So tell us about yourself and why you're doing it, and lay it all down.
All right. Well, my name's Bennett. I'm the developer of a game called Hammerheart. I'm not a reenactor. I'm just become sort of present within the reenactment community as part of the research I've been doing, and also through talking to Guthrum of Norvik and the Shire Reeve, because they've both been helping me out with historical consultancy.
Brilliant. So interesting. You've come to Reenactors as your first port of call for advice. What made you kind of go in that direction? What was your, obviously some people go down a library, I suppose, or log on to Wikipedia. What made you go towards Reenactors?
Well, initially I was very cautious because I used to do a little bit of reenactment I became involved with a group who shall not be named, and I was quite disturbed by the view on authenticity. So that really, I had quite a I looked down on reenactment quite a bit until I met with Tom. I just mentioned at some point on Anglo-Saxon posting that I was doing a game, and he mentioned that he did models. And then through talking with him, I've learned about this whole other side of reenactment that takes authenticity to quite a respectable level.
It's the light side, isn't it?
Yeah.
Join
So
us, we have the salt.
I have been doing research outside of just talking to reenactors, of course. But through Tom, I've become aware of some very knowledgeable people who've been able to give me. I won't take anyone's word for anything. I want evidence from somebody, so then I can look at the source myself and then come to an educated decision. But I think reenactors are so passionate about the subject that they really are a library in of themselves, and I can find a lot of good sources from them.
Oh, I'm glad you've managed to meet the right people then after a bit of a shaky start. So tell us a bit about the game. What's your motivation for putting it together?
My motivation for what? Just for the game or for the context of it? Or
Obviously, you're making a game from scratch, which I mean, I'm incredibly envious of, because I'd love to have the know-how of where to start with putting that together. So yeah, what made you decide to make a video game? And I suppose after that, why a Viking Age game, and why go whole hog on the authenticity?
well, I think I've been interested in making games for about 10 years at least now. I didn't actually get involved in like using real engines or any of that kind of stuff until about 2 years ago. But it's programming has always been like something I've been just dabbling in, and then very recently I went full ahead with it. But it's about 3 years ago now, maybe a little bit more. I had this idea because I was getting into history, into Vikings and stuff through completely the wrong media. I was, watching the Vikings TV show, looking at Woofer as being the most accurate people in the world.
What do you mean? The Vikings TV show is completely accurate and has no mistakes.
Nothing wrong with it. But yeah, although I was looking in the wrong place, and through music as well, I developed a real interest in this period in history.
I listened to Wardrina once, therefore I like the Vikings.
It was actually Bathory, which is where the name comes from.
Fair enough.
Okay. But yeah, it was less so about the historical combat and the material culture and that sort of thing, but it was just this very, I'll call it a spaghetti western atmosphere that I think this period in history has. That in my head, I have there's this very specific feeling that I get when I think of this period in history versus other ones that I think the world was in a much more. I don't want to say desolate, but it was very things were far apart and people were very insular and living in these small groups, these small cultures and villages. That's one thing that really captivated me about it.
I think it's interesting you bring up the comparison to spaghetti westerns. I've not thought of that in the context of Viking Age sort of productions, but I think it's a really good analogy.
Yeah,
like if and we look on the current sort of media being put out about the Viking Age in the same way people look at spaghetti westerns now.
What would we call it? Would we call it like a ramen dark age, or?
That's a good question.
I had been interested in spaghetti westerns and not actually just about the films, but more about the general atmosphere that they capture. And I when I was thinking about the Viking Age and learning a little bit about it, that this atmosphere just stuck in my head straight away. I think there's a big, a lot of similarity between the two, even though there's a lot of difference as well.
Yeah, I think the similarity between them is from both the perspective of the frontiersmen and the Viking explorers. It's an age of exploration and adventure, and there's a sense of epicness in that, with larger than life heroes in the sagas, as well as history, and the people like Harold Hardrada, who had more hobbies than I think all of us combined. For example, Bjorn Ironside and legendary figures like that is very similar to, that whole aspect of the Western, going off into the wilderness, facing adversity. So yeah, I totally get you on that one.
Yeah.
So what?
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, finish the thought.
All right, yeah, I was going to say it's also you're very small compared to the world. The world is absolutely huge. There's a lot to be seen and discovered, and I think it's just the potential, the untapped potential, the untamed land within, figuratively, but that intrigues me about it.
So obviously that's some pretty solid reasons for starting a video game. I've started projects for less inspiration than that. So with regards to the accuracy, what motivated you to do so much of this research and not make the kind of the same moves that, say, Ubisoft have with regards to designs and aesthetic?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I don't think there was ever a point when I made the conscious decision, okay, I want this to be 100% historically authentic. Oh yeah, I don't think there was ever a point when I made the conscious decision to have it be completely historically accurate. It was, there's this atmosphere which I wanted to capture into a medium, that medium being games, because I've been interested in game development for a long time. But as I sort of learned more about history, I saw it as quite an injustice that shows like Vikings, like games like Assassin's Creed do, when they sort of teach people incorrectly and they send them in completely the wrong direction.
You're starting to sound like a reenactor.
But it's true. I think I'd spoken to friends who enjoyed the Viking Age and were interested in that period in history, but they were treating complete bullshit as fact, and they didn't know any better. This wasn't a decision that these people had made. They'd been informed incorrectly by the media. And although I think there's nothing too wrong about being wrong about some things, but just having the complete wrong idea of what a particular culture or what a particular period in history was all about. I just think I would not want to do that injustice to people personally, and I would like to put out something that actually educates and informs as well as is a fun game to play.
That's pretty admirable. So I know Alex wanted to say something there. First off, thanks guys putting the correct pronunciation of Ubisoft in the chat, and then continuing on with Boobysoft, Booby Hard, Willy Soft, while I'm trying to listen to Bennett. I had to mute my fucking microphone so I didn't start spitting my coffee at the screen.
This is an intellectual discussion we're having. So you want intellectuals? You've got intellectuals.
Yeah.
I was trying to hold back laughter as I was saying all of that.
I could hear poor Bennett just giving us the lowdown, and Ubisoft. Oh, for God's sake! Right. So So for those listening, if you're wondering why Bennett's voice started cracking halfway through, he wasn't going through puberty. It was just the Shire Reeve was dicking about in the chat. So speaking of, Alex, you're about to say something.
I've completely forgotten.
So obviously, we've kind of covered the motivation. We've covered the the historical accuracy. Tell us more about the game itself. What's the setting? What will the player be playing as?
The player will well, you take control of a Thane from Mercia, not to be confused with the amazing reenactment group, which is a big inspiration to me. But you play as a Mercian Thane during and in the month succeeding the Battle of Brunanburh, or Brunanburh, I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Cut out whichever one isn't. But yeah, so you're traveling to protect something or to save something. I won't mention too much about the story because it's not necessarily set in stone yet.
Yeah.
But you travel all throughout Northern Europe and the British Isles, one experiencing the different cultures of this period in history, and also continuing with what I think is quite a good story that I've got to give the most credit to the Shire Reeve on.
Oh, thank you. I'm really proud of that story. It's like my love child.
It's in terms of the gameplay, there's obviously the very heavy story element of it. The entire game is story driven, but it also aims to create not an extremely. This is one area where I've sort of laid back on accuracy a little bit, is in the combat, because I want it to be quite accessible to a lot of players who will actually be able to physically make the mouse movements possible, required even. But I also want it to have some level of skill and realism to the combat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's very combat heavy. It's very story heavy. But I also want to give the player a little bit of freedom, not as much as like a massive open world RPG, but I want the player to actually be able to walk around and experience the world around them, rather than be taken from one place to another very quickly without actually experiencing any of the history.
So you're trying to avoid railroading them, essentially.
Yeah.
So we should have had a few screenshots of the game and something.
Yes, they'll be up on the podcast video.
But I think it's a good time to bring up the one where Bennett is posing with 4 very recognizable characters.
Yes.
Yeah, the top one.
And the correct sizes as well.
Yeah, so what do you want to know about it?
So could you I think everyone should be able to see now that is quite clearly, from left to right, Guthrum of Norvik, the Shire Reeve, yourself, Bennett, in the centre, me posing quite nicely with Fuckbringer and a shield. So clearly I'm very well equipped there, and a true to life scale Just Eastern things.
Why do you think I used a spear?
So we joked last time that whenever I've drawn Just Eastern things as part of the League of Authentic Shit posters, I accidentally made him a lot bigger based on the picture he sent me, and he's only 5'6". So it's quite funny to see him scales next to the rest of us in this picture. But yeah, tell us a bit about your design, because it's quite a unique looking style.
Well, yeah, I can't really say much in terms of the height because I'm shorter than Just Decent Things by 3 inches. But yeah, I wanted to create a didn't want it to look too computery, if that makes sense. My first thought was pixel art because that's a very easy medium for. Well, I'm quite an artistic person, and it's quite an easy medium for me to create the shapes and the styles that I wanted to create and have them be very there and recognizable on the screen. But for a history game, I think that would have been fine if I was going for like fantasy or something less rooted in reality. But for this, I wanted something that doesn't have any connotations as of yet.
Yeah.
So I went for 3D models. And originally, because I didn't have Guthrum helping me out with the models, I was making everything myself, and I was using.
Guthrum told me some terrible tales about what those models used to look like.
Oh Jesus! I can pull up a video. I can get an early video.
They didn't look terrible. It's just the way they were constructed was just, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any screenshots of what they look like. That has all been purged from reality. But I do have some testing videos that show how they actually would appear on screen. But my models were made with primitives. So I would get a cylinder, I would put a circle on the end of that cylinder, and that'd be like half of a leg. I would do that again for the lower half. I would use a box for the shoes. The torsos were made out of 3 boxes, and then they had cylinders, so they sort of could rotate against each other without clipping too much. The belt was another box, and it was just a big mess. But it was the only thing I could come up with, and to like animate it correctly, because I can't model, I can't rig or anything like that. So to get rid of all the horrible issues with lighting, I just had them be completely unlit. So what that means is on a shader, it doesn't interact with light whatsoever. So it doesn't cast a shadow, it doesn't receive a shadow, and there's no shading on that on the model itself. So it looks like just a 2D image on screen. I've linked a video to testing, one of my very early testing videos, and that sort of shows you how they appeared on screen. If you look closely, you can see that it is it's lots and lots of primitives, but then because of the unlit shader, they sort of look uniform.
Yeah,
Right,
when I saw how you'd done that, I almost cried. It's just such an inefficient way of doing it.
It's clever, but it's a clever way to get around a simple problem.
Yeah. I also, to avoid this is something that remained as well from actually when I wanted to do it as pixel art. I had a shader on to sort of fray the edges a little bit and have it to look a little bit more like what I hoped would be a painting, which was my original vision for the art style. I wanted it to look painted.
Kind of like the Banner Saga in a way.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And then Guthrum came along.
Hello.
And he said to me, I can make some models for your game if you'd like. So he did, and I was really impressed with them. And I got rid of that the horrible paint filter straight away, just so that the models are clearer. They look a bit more computery now. I respect that. But I think it's an aesthetic. I can think of one other game that's had this aesthetic, and this is by complete coincidence because this was released after Hammerheart started development, which is Untitled Goose Game.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I've spoken to quite a few people about the game after its sort of release within the wider reenactment community after we did that post about getting impressions to recreate in the game. And a lot of people have said they actually really like the art style, which is fantastic praise for you, of course. And
what I particularly like about it is that as someone who my comics are drawn in a simple way where I draw them deliberately kind of low quality, but still have to capture people's the key attributes and make them recognizable. I can appreciate that although these are very simple looking, they capture, at least this picture of the four of us, they capture us perfectly. I can instantly recognize who's who. And even in the other photos of, mid-battle and the other developments you've shown, it's very easy to pick out distinct individuals. I think that's that's a real success when it comes to a game.
When I first saw the model Tom had made of me, I was blown away. It genuinely looks like me, and that's what's really weird. It has no eyes or nose, and yet it looks like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is obviously the art style, but then there is just Tom's skill as well, which is the real reason for all of that. I think
definitely.
You make me blush.
But yeah, the art style really with the unlit shading, that's something I had because of the technical limitations earlier on, and then I just kept it because I liked it, and I think it's for the better.
Yeah, the aesthetic of it looks great. What you've told us about the gameplay, with regards, you've put up updates about how the spear works and the knife work and the axe work. It all looks really promising, and I'm sure a lot of people will be fascinated to follow this to its conclusion. Now, we put up some posts between us, see if anyone wanted to ask you any questions while you're here. So if you don't mind answering a couple, and expanding on them as you see fit. We've got one which I'll rephrase because they've been a bit crude in the asking of it. What's the inspiration behind the name? Why Hammerheart?
Well, I mentioned music briefly earlier. And that's because one of the things that introduced me to the Viking Age really was it's a very common lyrical theme within black metal. The band Bathory, they released an album called Hammerheart in 1990, and that is probably my first conscious exposure to the Viking Age as a lyrical theme, and it's one of the things. I think the atmosphere in that album is what has stuck with me throughout all my research into the Viking Age and with the development of Hammerheart. It's relates to the spaghetti western thing. It's very, very epic at the same time, very bleak and very atmospheric.
Yeah, it's a nicely almost cheesy name for it's kind of the name you'd expect for a Viking Age thing. But I think that's because obviously the gameplay and the level of detail you've gone into it isn't what we'd normally expect.
So
Sorry.
One example I can think of in terms of detail is like when Bennett asks us about stuff, he asks about literally everything, which is fantastic because, for example, the menu pop-ups or the UI, that's how a lot of Vellum looked when it was scored originally. So you have actual lines on the page with punches on the edge, and things like that. So it's everything from UI to clothes to weapons to armor to encampments to the trees that they have in the game.
I've seen in my daily scrolling, I've seen your name come up in a lot of the groups, like the reenactment pages and Viking Age groups that I'm part of, and asking questions and getting reference. So it's a very mixed replies actually, and I saw the you wanted to know if there's any distinguishing kits.
Oh, is this the Welsh one?
10th century Scots and
no, the kilts.
Oh God.
When Bennett makes posts like this, unfortunately, it attracts some very, very, very good answers that really help, and also not that.
I remember on about Celts, as the token Scotsman, I suppose, of this 4 people, I remember getting told I should do a Pictish impression at one point back when I very first started, and I was like, "Oh yeah, cool," And I looked into it, and obviously there's no Celts, which at the time I actually didn't know. So I kind of always assumed that there'd been a thing, and I know that. I know that instead it was a long tunic, similar to the Welsh, etc. But I've seen people portraying like pigs wearing kilts, and they look terrible. They look absolutely awful.
They don't even actually. Sorry, go on.
This comes back actually to that Sheringham post you made with the video, because that group. I mean, I don't personally know any social politics, but when we saw the supposed Pictish kit, I mean it's really disappointing, because I know people that do very, very good Pictish kit, and the distinction has to be made.
I've been in touch with him before. There's a fellow in Regia, someone put me in touch with before. And I couldn't tell you his name.
Is it Ridian?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. He's got Pictish kit, and it looks phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
There's a few in Regia that have absolutely spot on Pictish kit, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of good that you've had such a critical eye, because that was such an unhelpful comment, and the 90 replies afterwards repeating, I know this because I'm a local, sod your citations and evidence, was probably the least helpful thing that you could come across on there.
It's part of my philosophy. People like that they're part of the reason why I'll never take anyone's opinion at face value. I always want evidence.
Well, even if me or Guthrum say something, we tend to understand that you'd want us to actually back it up. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. Well, the 4 of us here all take things with a hefty pinch of salt, so you're in the right place, really. Well, the next question was from Jennifer Klimczak. There we go. Sorry, it's quite a blurry screen grab. Says, looking forward to the game. Any idea yet what platform it will be on? Plus, I really like the amount of research you're putting on. Looks better than any other game I can think of so far. So that's some good praise.
High praise, yeah.
Especially from her.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you. And in terms of the platform, I'm developing it at the moment for PC. If you don't have a gaming computer, not to worry. For until 1 week ago, I had a terrible computer. It could barely run the game engine itself. But then when I ran the game on its own, I was still getting 60 frames per second, and it's quite a lightweight, fast game.
Yeah, I've got a fairly good computer, but I could tell just from playing it that it's not going to be too load intensive. It's not got many complex calculations in it, so.
Yeah, my computer's a brick and it can run it fine.
Yeah.
So far, this is the obviously.
This is the caveat.
Testing, in-house testing stuff.
I think we'll definitely have to implement. Well, Bennett will have to definitely implement some clever loading mechanism to make the buffering easier, but I'm sure that can be done.
Oh yeah. Well, I've not put any thought into loading screens or anything yet, so that'll all come. But yeah, generally, what I will say is Windows computer is what I'm working on at the moment. If you have a Windows computer, I would say 99% of Windows computers will be able to run it, unless it's like running Windows 98 or something. In terms of other systems like consoles, Switch, and that sort of thing. It's something I would like to do, but I've never released a game to the public before. I've never, especially not released anything on consoles. So it's I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Like, I can't promise anything, but I can't say that I don't want to either.
Cool. So initially computer, PC, Windows, and then, who knows, look to the future.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've got one from my page. Conrad Birgerson wants to know if you'll add shoulder fur as a paid DLC.
Think of all of that woofer money you could make.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think I could make one like a Women Warriors DLC, a shoulder fur DLC maybe.
Don't forget,
maybe...
don't forget the Mjolnir Hammer Danax DLC.
You got to have Danaxes even though it's about 100
and
years
maybe
too early
even
for
one
them.
for Leather Lamellar as well.
Yes, that. In fact, I heard Leather Lamellar was worn by only the most elite of warriors.
I'm actually having an aneurysm. Oh no, my heart.
From my perspective, I want to know if there's an Easter egg whereby our 4 characters, if you get them all together in a room, they perform the Ginyu pose.
Now that.
Oh,
I feel like that will be a mechanism now.
Yeah, I think that will happen now.
that may not have been something that I was considering. I do have some good ideas for Easter eggs, though. I obviously won't mention here.
Yeah.
But there's a certain film that I really love that's set in a similar time period that I think a lot of people will also love.
Okay, cool.
References.
Yeah, I mean, if you get us, if I play this game eventually when it comes out and I get those 4 characters together and they do the Ginyu pose, I will be so fucking happy. that will genuinely make my year, if that's in there. No pressure or anything. But last question, unless anyone's had any more in the meantime, Derek Mink, who asks, to my understanding, it's a top-down fighting game, but will there be like slight RPG elements?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
From what
Yeah, for a while I've sorry, I cut you off then, but yeah, I referred to it originally as a top-down fighting game, and I think I was wrong in calling it that because fighting game has the sort of Mortal Kombat connotations to it, where you're.
Did we decide on was it combat-oriented RPG? I think we called it.
That's what I'd call it. Combat-oriented. I'd say it's actually has a bit more in common with JRPGs than it does Western RPGs, but in that it still follows a very linear story, and it's by no means an open world RPG, but
It'll
it has
open world elements. But
it has a lot of those elements within it that I'm thinking of. Like, we're making these really nice these detailed scenes of like Jorvik, of Dublin, and it'd be a shame if the player was to go there, kill a few guys, and then walk back out the front door. I want the player to be able to look around, explore, feel the atmosphere of these places.
Yeah, I mean, for example, the section that's actually in Dublin isn't that long. You're only there for a brief period of time, but we want to have the city available to you to explore as a character.
Yeah, and it's not just in the British Isles as well. There's we're looking at going to the player will be going to Norway at some point through the game. I don't want to reveal too much about the story, but I think I can say Norway.
Sounds awesome.
But yeah, there's a lot of that. Just the scenery there contrasts a lot with what we used to in England and Ireland. And it would be a shame not to to really let that be seen in all its glory.
Something that will be cool in Norway will be showing a type of hunting we couldn't show in the UK, because there's going to be a boar hunting scene with one of the local jarls, and I think that'll be really nice to demonstrate, in the tundra of northern Norway.
Yeah, definitely. So there's not only just the visual differences, but there's also these cultural elements that you'll be able to find through conversations, through activity, and that sort of thing, which aren't necessarily core to the story, and they aren't completely open world either. But it sort of delves into those RPG elements that you might be familiar with in other games.
Well, that sounds absolutely fantastic. So, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure, Bennett, talking to you and finding out more about this game. So what we're going to do is we'll link all appropriate, channels and pages to Hammerheart in the link and description below the video. So thank you very much for coming in and showing this off to us. It's been a real lovely change of palette from the shit
AC
that we were looking
Valhalla,
at last week. But perhaps you'd like to stay a little longer and take part in one of our regular indulgences, which is Farb of the Week, before you go.
Yeah, okay.
So if we put up this week's Farb of the Week.
Definitely.
And for Bennett, that'll be in podcast content, I think.
I think I know.
Yeah.
This
Yes,
interesting gentleman.
Yes, the gentleman in the brown Lamellar.
So, Bennett, being our guest, if you'd like to go, maybe take a punt at what strikes you as wrong in this picture.
I'll be honest with you, I can't see anything wrong with this. This is a character that I would love to take inspiration from for my game.
Oh, my heart.
hate you.
My heart. Oh.
No, perfect answer.
No, I'm seeing what looks like Vendel era leg guard things. Splintered. What are they? Greaves?
Yeah.
This centigrade kite shield, which is just
It's cursed.
yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I don't want to say too many mean things because this is kit that someone's actually put time into, but it's just it's so wrong on every single level.
That's so kind and gentle of you not to, go in too hard. But luckily, that's what we're here for. But yeah, as you pointed out, the center grip kite shield, which is also flat.
Yeah.
The understanding is that they're at least curved.
Yeah, as far as I know, we don't have any evidence for flat kite shields, or center grip kite shields. So this is the duality of both of those inaccuracies.
D-plate lamellar, which is a sin that I'm sure we're going to see a lot in this section. For those of you who don't know why there's this big thing about lamellar, it's not just lamellar as a catch-all thing. We do have lamellar in the period,
Yeah.
and one that was found in Burka.
D-plate. Yeah, D-plate is from Visby rather than... and the problem with it is Visby is a 14th century battle site with armor from about 60 years before. So early 14th century armor. And that is several hundred years too late.
Yeah, it's not... It's kind of like saying... but they had mail at Yermanburg and turning up in Lorica Hamata, what the Romans wore. It's the wrong style, and in this particular case, completely the wrong period.
Yeah.
So for those of you who aren't kind of clued in on the lamellar argument, that's it. It's not he's wearing lamellar. He's wearing the wrong lamellar and entirely the wrong armor.
Yeah, no one's going to criticize someone who's attempting to portray Roos as he is, as, you know, you're wearing Lamellar. We know the Roos actually did wear Lamellar, but they didn't wear that.
I was wondering. I genuinely don't know this. Is it authentic to be wearing mail underneath Lamellar like that?
The evidence we have suggests that they would have almost always worn it underneath, as the Lamellar was primarily an arrows defense rather than melee weapons defense, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
We've tested chainmail out underneath Lamellar, and the arrows tend to pierce the Lamellar but won't pierce the mail. On our testing, anyway. So the chainmail definitely works as a great buffer for defense. I will say, having been doing what that guy done before I got brains, your shoulders hurt after like half an hour, and your entire body starts to get very tired because you're carrying a lot of kit on you.
A lot of what we think with regards to wearing Lamellar and with the mail would have been very high status mounted warriors. Not necessarily cavalry. It could have been mounted infantry, like the Vendel, but it's very distinct, and it's one of those impressions that you've got to do a lot of work into to make it correct, because it is very distinct. It's not something that your average Viking portrayal would be wearing, for example.
Yeah, you see a lot of guys that just slap it on and they're like, now I'm an elite warrior. And it's just, it doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
Danax is a bit long. I don't know, he's using
it's also worth noting.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, it's also worth noting that the Lamellar's all rusty, and we know that, you know, that this was a very expensive piece of armor, so why would they let it get, you know, in disrepair? It just doesn't make sense.
The butted mail is also, and this is getting slightly pickier compared to the other stuff there, but it looks like it's butted and zinc plated, which is
galvanized.
Not a great recreation. But
I'll be honest.
Nearest to us, he's wearing two swords for a start, which is bonkers. But the sword nearest to us that doesn't appear to have a handle.
Yeah, it's just raw steel.
Yeah, I mean, up until like yesterday, I think I put it on. I had a sword identical to that because it's still a work in progress. I wouldn't dream in a million years of a great sword. There is no point.
Yeah,
you know, leave it where it is.
Of course, there's no point. It's blunt.
Well, you say that, but it's.
I know your one isn't. I know your one isn't.
No evidence. There is no evidence that is a.
But the other thing is, if we're talking about inaccuracies with this guy, anyway, but why does he need two swords?
Yeah,
and because
he is elite Viking,
and then
to do with his shield. His shield isn't equipped,
and then a knife as well.
With an unworked antler handle, but that's nitpicky.
And the thing that none of you guys have picked up on yet, it's possibly because I haven't seen you guys use Lamellar. Thankfully, you've got more brains than I ever did. But you try swinging that Danax with those shoulder plates on Lamellar.
Well, from what I understand, the shoulder plates are pretty egregious in general. From what I've seen,
so you can't do it properly with the double set. So, and I don't care what anybody says.
Like, right. So if it is done, it needs to be a single set, basically.
It needs to just be the one on top. Yeah. There's no way he's swinging that properly.
I was under the impression that the evidence we have suggests they didn't have any shoulder straps at all. Shoulder plates. Sorry.
Yeah. Shoulder plates are from the speculative recreation of the Barker set.
Yeah. Well, there's also the further
based on the Turkish one, wasn't it, from Ballysook?
Yeah.
Because the plates matched up.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, there's also the further clarification of that is that, you know, if Lamellar is used to mainly protect against arrows, which is what we gather, that would back it up, because at the end of the day, your shoulders aren't what you want to protect against arrows. And if you can lighten it anywhere, that would be where you'd lighten it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chuck in a picture here for this. This is the speculative recreational Barker set.
Is this the long one?
Yeah, it's extrapolated.
Yes, I'm aware of it, but I think it's the wrong direction, if that makes sense. Or it's I think it's either the wrong direction or I don't know. I'm going.
What's ever wrong with just wearing chainmail? It looks good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy to clean. It's comfortable.
Easy to repair.
It fits around me, all my belly. It fits around all my belly. All right. I genuinely don't understand what the issue is with chainmail. Like, because you could pick. All right, you're gonna go buy custom-made chainmail. It can cost a little bit. All right. There's really good suppliers in the UK and really good suppliers out in Europe that do it. But if all else fails, okay, and you wanted to just get a generic set of chainmail, it's like £150.
Yeah,
and you can tailor it to fit you easily as hell. And I'm on about flat riveted, which I know isn't like properly correct for the period. That tends to be what everybody uses.
I have flat riveted myself. I know most of the evidence we have suggests round rings, but it's not the most egregious thing in the world.
I can't find a good supplier of round riveted that doesn't like explode quite a lot, or is very poor quality. So far, I'm actually after a set myself, but yeah. It's like his kit is probably, and I know we mentioned this last time as well, right? But if I was to throw like a value at his kit, I'm gonna be saying, £600 probably. 700 maybe.
Maybe a bit more. It's too expensive for what it is either way. It's just
what we've got here on paper is everything you'd want to put together a Kievan Rus inspired kit, Varangian Guard, Kievan Rus. But it's been poorly executed because they've gone with they, instead of going for the right style Lamellar, they've just gone, oh, Lamellar, I'll buy that. Yeah. Instead of going for the right chain, they've gone, oh, there's chainmail, I'll put chainmail on. Yeah. They had kite shields and a Varangian Guard.
Honestly, this impression would look so much better if even just the male Lamellar and shield was sorted.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think what's happened here is they've, in the same way people use, Lamellar as a blanket term, forgetting that it actually refers to many different types. Like male doesn't always refer to a Brynje, it also refers to, a hauberk or, Roman hamata.
Well, from what I understand, male just means armor. Most of the time. So if a knight said fetch me my mail, it would be his entire harness. Yeah.
But what I mean is that they've said, the Kievan Rus wear this. They've simply gone, a kite shield, and bought a kite shield or made a kite shield without making the effort and the research to make it look like the kite shields they actually had.
What gets me is I don't think I've ever seen a center grip kite shield. So I don't know what they're going off.
My understanding with the center grip kite shield is that would completely go against the point of a kite shield.
Absolutely. And if you're, it starts out as a cavalry shield. If it's center grip, that causes a lot of issues. Yeah. Because, for example, you can't grip the reins while you're riding, right? You can't.
I've got the bottom of it actually. Because I know which group this is, and I know where they get their inspiration from. That is perfectly correct. If you followed the illustrations in an Ian Heath Osprey book.
The Ospreys are out of date though by like 25 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Ospreys are out of date for longer than I've been on a bloody planet.
The Ospreys were out of date 10 years ago when I was first looking into this period, largely.
Yeah. That's not what's happened here. They've picked up an Osprey book, looked at the Cave and Rust section, and gone with the illustrations.
Yeah, what I think they might have done is notice that the early depictions of kite shields tend to have bosses on them.
Yeah. Well,
It's funny,
I can't. I think we discussed this.
In those same sources. They're still shown as gripped with straps rather than with a center grip as well.
I think we discussed this actually the other day. The other podcast when we were talking about the dangerous fighting style with the strapped shield, and we also discussed that the reason they kept bosses on kite shields at the beginning was because that exact reason. It still protects your arm from being slashed when, if you hit the boss, it'll divert the force away, or it'll attempt to at least.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand that has a function, even if it's not to protect the hand itself.
But my assumption is they've just seen these early kite shields with bosses still on them, and then assumed that they were center grip because of that, because that's what they assumed that the sole purpose of a boss is.
Like I say, going just from an illustration that you see in these books, this is a reasonable interpretation of those. Without they obviously don't show the reverse, so that would be a natural thing to assume. If you did no other research, which I think is the case here.
I know we've touched on this before, and I'm conscious of mentioning it again, but do you think realistically then people like that in a broad spectrum, because they've spent so much and because they believe it so much, that's why they refuse to change their kit, because they're heavily invested in?
I think I don't know if they understand this or not, but I found that reenactment kit usually holds its value very well, and I don't know if they're just not aware of the second-hand market, but I've sold a lot of my old kit for very reasonable prices, close to what I've paid for it at second-hand reenactment pages and so on. And I think they don't realise that they could get almost as much as they paid for it back if they sold it and bought something better.
Sorry, then we'd have another target to laugh at next week. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah. Well,
I agree, though. The reenactment kit does hold its value, very much so, because even if you can't sell it within the reenactment circle, there are countless LARP pages out there. I remember my very first set of chainmail was a set of butted chainmail. Again, I'm talking years ago, and I had no knowledge, no experience in it at all. I just, wanted to get some stuff, and I think I paid about 120 quid for it, and I think I got £110 back when I sold it about a week after buying it.
I got similar sort of. I bought my buttered chainmail years and years and years ago, and I sold it last November, for £20 less than I bought it for, I think. So it really does hold its value.
Yeah, and because it's super light, in that example, people buy it in SCA and in LARP, so it's worth holding. But even things like Danaxes, if they're wrong, or that shield.
You know what? His Danax is probably the least egregious thing he has.
It looks quite nice.
The Danax is quite nice.
Yeah, I quite like it.
So let's wrap this one up then. What are we scoring this one out of? Guthrum of Norvik, what's your scores on the doors this week?
Oh, I give him 3 out of 10 rusty lames.
Just Eastern?
I'm going to give him, because I do like that Danax, he can have 2 out of 10 Woofer points.
Alex?
I'm going to go for 5 out of 95 planked center grip kite shields.
Bennett, do you have a score you want to throw in the mix?
Yeah, honestly, I think the things you guys have pointed out are very, very minor. I'd give him a 9.5 out of 10.
Ooh, strong.
Oh, controversial.
I do like a good bit of sarcasm.
I'll tell you what, in a reenactment sense, I would give him an inaccuracy. I'd give 3 grains of salt.
He's not the
Shaker.
worst we've seen. That's the thing.
But
He is. Yeah, he's not. He's not the worst.
I will give a complimentary score of 6.5 tattered copies of Osprey
Yes.
out of 10. So that, I think, will wrap up this week. Thank you again to
definitely.
Bennett for coming on and chatting to us about Hammerheart. Links will be in the description below for all associated material. So, thanks for coming on, mate. And thank you again to Guthrum, Just Eastern Things, and the Shire Reeve. And, of course, signing off, your host, Goatworn Armband. This has been the Goatworn Armcast, week 3. See you next week.
Cheerio, lads.
See you guys. Have a good one.
See you later.
See you later.